All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show. We are your illustrious hosts. I am Alex Baquero. This is Christopher Pittsburgh T-Balls Joe Torre Condit, your American villain voices, as always, serving up the lukewarmiest of lukewarm opinions. Please go follow, like, rate, review, subscribe, all the places below our faces. And thank you. Still got it. I am one half of your sleep deprived hosts. We apologize that we are a day late on this, but life continues to life for the two of us. We have made it. Unfortunately, we cannot adhere to our more recent policy of multiple releases this week. So this is going to be a massive one. We are going to commiserate with you all, hopefully a little bit more lukewarmy given the benefit of time, or maybe not, about Wolves. And then we will preview what is shaping up to potentially be Villa's most crucial match of the season against Chelsea, at least thus far. Chris, Mr. CEO Condit, how are you this evening?
I mean, I just took a half beer to the face to get ready for this pod because I feel like I'm going to need it. So those of you who weren't on YouTube, be sure to check that out on YouTube. That was how I elected to start the pod today. I'm doing great otherwise, but if we're talking about from a Villa perspective, terrible. Not great. Not lukewarm at all. Terrible.
How are you? Yeah, not great for a number of different reasons, Villa probably being the preeminent one of those. I really struggle, Chris, genuinely. I really struggle to think of a pod that I've wanted to do less than this one. And nothing against you, obviously. I love to talk to you about the Villa, but with listen, Villa has not been perfect the entire time that we've been doing this podcast over the course of 3 years, right? There have been many a frustrating result. There have been many time where we've come on here really pissed off, but it's always felt cathartic. And I think in the end, we've always kind of been able to see the bright side of things, the silver lining, the horizon where they would get through the time. This, man, since we started doing this, this might be the lowest that I've felt about this team, and we'll get into it a little bit later. Maybe that's just me. Maybe you still have a little bit more cause for optimism, but this was,
there is a bright side there. The bright side is you feel that way and they still sit fourth. You know, like that. That's the bright side.
Yeah,
you know,
that's fair. I suppose we'll get ahead of it. Some good news that I saw on Twitter today. I haven't seen this verified by a more trustworthy news source, but apparently Yuri Tielemans might actually be in contention to face Manchester United, which is a crazy turnaround from just a week or two ago. John McGinn making it seem like Yuri was going to be injured for much longer than he was. So that is certainly a boon for Aston Villa, and maybe, yes, a silver lining that we can look at. But Chris, let's dive right into it. I mean, no excuses. A team in Villa's position cannot be losing to what formerly was the worst team in Premier League history. Thanks to this now second win of the season that they got against Aston Villa, they are now not. They will surpass Derby's record. But this also wasn't like a smash and grab victory for Wolves. Thoroughly deserved it, thoroughly outplayed Villa. And I think if you took an alien from Mars, put them down and just showed them this game and said, hey, one of these teams is third place, one of these teams is 20th, guess who's which? Probably would have said Wolves were the ones that had been chasing the title for most of the season.
I would think so. I think that not on XG though. By the way, XG Villa won, and we can talk about the reasons why for that, because I do think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. Well,
we'll get into that into larger implication on the season.
And I'm talking about Twitter. So there's always a fundamental misunderstanding when you're talking about Twitter, right?
Sure.
People on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, that there were very few points during that game that I actually thought that Villa were going to win and actually threaten goal. The same problems are continuing to pop up. So this isn't just about injuries to the midfield, because they are there, but it has nothing to do with why Villa struggled so much against such a bad team. And it's the same thing that you and I have been saying for weeks, and now is being called out by the halftime broadcast, by people on by pundits on Twitter and in the paper and on Sky Sports and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just that Villa are too easy to defend. The ball doesn't move fast enough. The players are far too narrow. NBC had a great graphic here in the States during the halftime broadcast, where they showed just how much space was available from the middle of the park to the touchline. And that's just space that Wolves didn't need to worry about defending at any point for much of the game. So and we've been saying it, I feel like for a year now, when you are this compact, teams are going to just be able to sit and defend and then hit you on the counter, and nothing happens that ever really threatens goal. Although Villa did have like 2 half decent chances early in the first half that I remember. But by and large, it's the same problems, and it doesn't seem to matter who is out there personnel wise. So now we need to start looking at what is going to be done to address this, because clearly this has to be addressed.
Yeah, listen, everybody can go check the tape. Like go listen to our podcast all season long. One, because that really helps juice our numbers, but 2, that it will actually prove what you're saying. We've been on this narrowness, on this slow style of play, on this lack of width, on the lack of inventiveness, on the lack of a plan B from Unai Emery for months, literal months. If you go back to the start of the season, we said the same thing. So like, go check the tape. It is both frustrating and refreshing, as you said, to see all this larger media now finally hop on this. Jacob Tanswell had a piece about Villa's narrow attack and its inability to break down a low block, I think yesterday or the day before. So it's all out there for people to see, and I wish people just listened to us a little while ago when we said that. You are right. 2 early chances for Aston Villa. First, 6th minute, Morgan Rogers plays a beautiful through ball to Ollie Watkins, who somehow can't figure out how to even shoot the ball again. The Ollie Watkins defenders will probably point and be like, "Oh, see, he didn't miss a chance." Yeah, because he didn't take the effing chance, right?
On that one, he wanted to get the ball on his, or keep the ball, I should say, on his right foot.
Yeah, he wanted to open up, I think,
Yeah.
and kind of curl it around the keeper to the other side.
Yeah.
He's got to just fire that with his left foot,
Yep.
curl it with the outside of his right foot, like boot, like you just have to shoot it. And then 1 minute later, Pau Torres misses a golden header off a corner, can't even get it on target. Of course, which means now the entire Villaverse is going to shout for Tyrone Mings to come back, because Tyrone Mings probably heads that top bins. And after that, all Wolves.
Yep.
All
that
Wolves.
was like 7th minute, I think.
Yeah, literally the 7th minute.
Yeah. So I was disappointed in the Ollie. You can't say mischance, but in the Ollie misplay where he didn't take the shot. And like I said, you could see what he wanted to do, which was keep the ball on his right foot. But the problem was that was where the defender was. And if he doesn't take that early, because he takes a touch and that carries the ball straight to the defender, if you're going to take the touch, I feel bad saying this because I'm not a professional soccer player. Anybody can look at me and know that. But if you're going to take that touch, it has to then go to your left foot and you have to shoot with your left. Because taking that touch put it right in line with the defender, and it was easy to knock that ball away. The Pau one, are we 100% sure that was a shot? Because I'm not.
If it wasn't a shot, it should have been a shot.
Well, that's what I thought. He might have been trying to flick it on to someone arriving behind him that just wasn't there. Like I've watched it like 4 times, and I'm not 100% sure that he was actually trying to shoot that. Should he have been? Is yes. Was he? Not sure. I think he may have been trying to flick it on. But again, that was just my read on it. Doesn't mean it was the right play, because the net was wide open there. And in fairness, Tyrone Mings probably does head that on
Yeah.
and score. The difference, though, is you could see when Emi Martinez is playing the ball out of the back, how much more comfortable he is going to Pau Torres, because almost every ball went directly to Pau Torres. And now we can talk about where that became ineffective, because I think that's a good transition. Because Villa got pressed by the worst team in the sport, or at least in the league, like it was, Villa hanging on for dear life back in the teens, trying to stay alive in the Premier League, and they were playing Man City or something. That, like, I've seen this movie before, but Paul Lambert was the coach. I would never have expected this from an Aston Villa side that's sitting in Champions League places under Unai Emery.
Yeah, I think that was a great transition. Pressed off the park is the easiest way to put it. Wolves had absolutely no fear getting up in the Villa defenders and midfielders' faces. Pau Torres, you saw, I think, the effect of him being out for the last handful of games, not being out injured, but not being selected for the last handful of games, because I think his passing was not up to his usual standard. A lot more wayward passes, a lot more stuff going long. A lot of players continue to be liabilities. Luka Dean didn't really help all that much. Amadou Onana had one of his worst games in months. It just seemed like he really did not seem to care. Multiple times throughout the game, it seemed like he would lose possession and was just kind of jogging back. And then you've got the player who probably has now become the newest target of Villa fans' ire, if more so than Amadou Onana, and that is Emiliano Buendia, who had yet another tough game. You and I talked about how we thought that he might be better served going back to the super sub role. I think the criticism on him has gone too far, where people are saying that it's always the case, but it's gone too far to the point of, like, he is an absolute waste of space, like, has no use, whatever. The dude still has contributed 12 goals this season for a team that can barely score any. So, to say he's useless is egregious in my mind, but I do think clearly not ready to start and be one of those immovable names on the team sheet right now.
I just think he's going to be better served as a super sub. He coming on against tired legs, like we talked about in the last couple of podcasts. I think that's a better fit for him right now. And personnel wise, you can do it. That's the I think the difficult thing. I think there are ways you can maneuver the squad so that you create potentially more width, or at least more space, if not width, because that doesn't seem to happen. But if nothing else, you can get a player who's gonna be a more deeper lying number 10, so to speak. Where they're not going to occupy the same space necessarily as Morgan Rogers. Morgan Rogers will be able to cut in from the left. I think there are things you can do personnel wise that make a lot more sense than Emi Buendia starting, and essentially, I hate to say it, but doing nothing but turning the ball over for large sections of the game. So I'm a big Emmy guy. I have been for a long time. I thought that when he came back and was coming in on the bench and was really effective as a starter for a stretch of the season as well. But now that seems to have passed. So now you need to shake it up and get somebody else out there who's going to be more effective, or at least try something, because it certainly can't be worse, right? Like, it cannot be going worse than it's going right now. That can't happen. This is the worst. We just lost to one of the worst teams in the history of the sport. This is not good. You got to change something.
Yeah, and you go up and down the team, and everybody was just so bad.
Stinker after stinker. Yeah,
stinker after stinker. Jadon Sancho hauled off early for Leon Bailey, who has not done anything to earn playing time in recent weeks.
Evan Gassan might look pretty good.
I know. Probably flew a little bit under the radar. Why Sancho irritated at least me, and I think Unai Emery, given the timing of the substitution so well. He was just way too narrow. You look in the 23rd minute, Morgan Rogers has that very tame left-footed curling effort. Part of the reason why he doesn't get that is because Sancho is way too far in field. You compare that to one of John McGinn's last goals that I keep kind of going back to, and what opened up the space for McGinn was Matty Cash on the wing, out wide, play it out to him. The defense needs to shift, and then McGinn is able to make that run in and get the space to get the goal. In this case, because Sancho's so close, ball goes to him. As soon as he passes it to Rogers, basically the same guy that defended him was able to defend Rogers. There was no one to really kick it through. Doesn't open up the space.
That also, I'd like to jump in on that if I could. And
yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Because there's a lot of talk now online about now that the screamers are gone for Aston Villa, they can't score. That's also part of the reason the screamers are gone, because Morgan Rogers in particular creates space by moving from the outside and cutting across goal and then firing from an open space. If he doesn't have space to move because another Villa player is occupying a similar place, then or defenders are there, then he can't then create the space to shoot and take those distance shots. So they're not even attempting those shots from distance anymore. Those goals have gone away because Villa aren't shooting from distance like they were before. And part of that is down to the width again.
And and you would always point out that the distance shots were a tactic to open up space behind, right? We always use the comparison with basketball of if you can actually hit your three-pointers, the defense needs to be honest about it, play that, and then you're able to slip it inside to your big man. If Villa are shooting from outside, that opens up the space in behind. You can get those intricate passes, cut to the byline, get the cutbacks, all those different ways to score that open up closer areas to score. But if the team is stepping out on you, but you're all narrow, you're not actually able to take advantage of that space in behind and play through them. And so you just become easier to defend a little bit higher up the pitch. I'm not even going to go through other Sancho mistakes that I thought he made in terms of decision making. Instead, I'd like to kind of pivot us to the second half and the subs again. Ross Barkley comes on. You and I were calling for him immediately. The cause of the first goal. First off, he gets megged. Then he absolutely loses the run of Andre in the box. Just kind of completely lets him go. Andre's ultimately the one who finished. Just atrocious sequence from Ross Barkley, someone who you and I are big fans of and thought deserved a starting spot.
Barkley
but
bros.
God, if he's going to defend like that, he can stay on the bench for all I care. That was, Chris, maybe this is hyperbolic of me to say, but it almost felt like kind of right before that goal went in and certainly after, it felt like everyone on the pitch just gave up.
I can't really speak to that. But there's something lacking for sure. And I don't know what it is, because if you're not driven to march on to Europe, then I think you're going to have a tough time anywhere, not just at Aston Villa. But I think that goal in particular seemed like the tough thing, I guess, is it seemed like a dagger against the 20th place team in the league. And that is a terrible place to be when you're chasing Champions League.
What happened to the team that earned the most points from losing positions all year long?
I'm not sure. Well, you got to score to earn points from losing positions. So that's step one.
So it's funny that you say that, Chris. Let's skip the subs. Let's just get to good points, bad points. And really, there are no good points. So let's just talk about bad points. We haven't looked. Actually, I don't think we have scored an open play goal in 6 games. 6 games. We've got an own goal, the Tyrone Ming, another one off a free kick or corner, and that's about it. And so I want Villa fans on Twitter. I want Villa fans everywhere. You can clip this and post it on social if you want. Shut up about the injuries. The injuries are not why we lost to Wolves. They are why our form has tailed off for sure. But the team of players that we had out there should have been able to beat one of the worst teams in Premier League history, because you cannot tell me that the players that Aston Villa started, if given a whole season, would be one of the worst Premier League teams in history. Or maybe they would, based on the balance of what we saw in that game. Chris, for me, I said this earlier in the season when we had that 5 match run to start the season. I'm going to say it again now. Finally, I think some other people are coming onto this. I am looking squarely at Unai Emery at this point. Yeah, the players are underperforming. Yeah, I just said maybe there's a lack of effort, but my God, you need to adapt. You need to adapt to the players that you have available. And if your structure, the structure that he likes to talk about so much, if the structure doesn't work for the players that you have, then you can't be stubborn. You have to change the effing structure. I'm sorry. Like, we are now at over a third of the season, 10 games in the Premier League. You can throw Europe in there. You could throw our League Cup losses to Brentford and then the FA Cup loss to Newcastle in there. There's probably 12 to 15, 16 games that Villa have looked bereft of any chance of taking a shot, let alone scoring a shot. And so at that point, when you're looking at a third of the season of your team being god effing awful, no chance of scoring, no matter the personnel. Beginning of the season, we had the personnel. Now we don't. That's management. That's management. And I think there need to be serious questions about Unai Emery's unwillingness or inability to institute any kind of a plan B to try and get the team out of this.
I think that the important thing is that Emery's not beyond criticism, and that's certainly fair. And I think the easiest change to make is personnel wise. There's one big change that you make, and I said it last time. One change will help, and I don't mean to talk bad about Ollie Watkins because he's been a great player for Villa, but he hasn't this season. He has not in almost any stretch. Even when he scored goals, we'd hope that would get him going, but he hasn't been able to put those together in bunches like he used to, like he has in the past. So you have to change it up, and you have to find space for Tammy Abraham in the starting 11, and Watkins has to go to the bench. And the other thing that I think is a fair criticism of Unai Emery, and you and I have texted about this, is the fact that he let Evan Gasson go on loan, and he let Daniel Malen go on loan, and both those players immediately made impacts for their teams. I mean, Daniel Malen is doing nothing but score goals. Granted, it's in Serie A, but he's still putting the ball in the back of the net at a prodigious rate.
And was for Villa.
Yeah. And then I think he was the second leading scorer. And then Gasson immediately gets, I think, goal assist. I think, if I remember right, his time at Palace, it's either goal and 2 assists or 2 goals and 2 assists. So, that is a fair criticism. And the fact that you let those players go, and now Villa can't so much as sniff the net, despite winning on XG against Wolves, is a problem, a major problem. So that's a fair criticism. So now the question is, what does he do? What do we see? Because something has to change here. Personnel, structure, and this is something.
This is, Chris, where I go back to structure and buildup. You had players that clearly can be productive. In the case of Daniel Malen, was productive for Aston Villa, and Villa were not getting production out of other areas, namely Ollie Watkins, namely Jadon Sancho, namely any of the other players that you could kind of put in that category. So why are you not adapting your structure to better suit a player like Daniel Malen, who can clearly produce for you? Yeah. Right? Why are you not moving Morgan Rogers wide left so that Daniel Malen can play the 10, for example? Right now, again, you could change Tammy Abraham for Ollie Watkins. That doesn't fix the width issue. I agree with you. Ollie needs to go to the bench, but this is why I keep coming back to structure. You can make that swap. Tammy Abraham isn't going to get a sniff of goal either. Now, if he gets one, I think that he's more
he'll shoot
more liable to put it in or at least take an opportunity. But you still need to mix up the structure, mix up the tactics, decide to move Morgan Rogers out wide left and Buendia to the middle or Barkley to the middle or something like that. Like, you got to do something to try and get something out of this team, because we've named Pod's definitions of insanity before, and it feels like we're in the same vein right now of this. We're going to be narrow. We're going to stand on the ball. We're going to try and brute force our way through a low block and ultimately just get beamed on the counter every single week.
Yep.
And it's too easy to defend. It's too easy to counter. It's too easy to figure out. If Unai Emery is allegedly like one of the top 5 managers in the world, he should be able to figure out a way around this with the players that are available. And that's where I'm back to, like, yes, it sucks and it is hugely impactful to not have Kamara, McGinn, and Yuri Tielemans. That is not an excuse for not having an open play goal for 6 matches.
Well, and
It's
I mean,
just not.
Emery is also a no excuse guy. So like that,
Yeah.
No excuse. We play with the players we've got. It doesn't matter. Like, honestly, Villa's second 11 should be able to roll out and at least be competitive against Wolves. And they were not, in any way. So this feels like rock bottom in a way, just because of the remaining schedule is not going to be this, easy. And if you can't take at least a point away from home against one of the worst teams in league history, then I don't know what we're doing here. You never threaten goal. Never threaten goal. Really.
So, Chris, you've mentioned XG a couple different times. Never threaten goal. Apparently we did, according to the numbers. I will give you a second to have your soapbox, and we'll see if there's anything that I need to add after that.
Well, I'm just going to say, and I did some social media stuff over the weekend because everyone was gloating in XG, including the XG philosophy, who 100% does this for engagement, because I refuse to believe that someone who wrote a book about statistical analysis refuses to do statistical analysis. But the XG that Villa generated, they have actually been higher on XG in most of these recent games where they've lost, if not all of them. But the reason for that is because they're taking more shots out of desperation late than their opponents in most cases, because they're down. And that is why we've always said you have to consider context when you're considering statistics. And the context of these statistics are important because, like I've said before, when Villa were underperforming XG, there were games where their opponents generated more XG, but no one who actually watched the game would say, oh, Villa were outplayed by so-and-so. And in this case, no one who actually watched that game would say at any point that Aston Villa outplayed Wolves outside of the first 7 minutes, if that. So they created some chances. Yes, they created some XG. I think one was probably that Pau Torres miss that was probably pretty big. And then Morgan Rogers was probably worth 0.2 or something, but you have to consider the totality of it, not just the totality of the game, but the totality of the season. My larger problem with the people on Twitter on XG is there are honest to God people who seem to think that Villa overperforming XG and not getting goals out of it is because they underperformed XG early in the season and got goals out of it. And this is a statistical regression to the mean. And that is not what it is, because that makes it seem like there is some sort of XG god who gets angry if you underperform and takes goals away from you. And what it is just that Villa are not creating good enough chances over the long term. And now what we're seeing is those fruits of the lack of fruits of their labor coming to fruition. So it's not that Villa will continue to overperform their opponents and score more XG, and this is punishment for earlier in the season. Those are two separate things. Those games are independent of each other. It's much larger context than that. This is statistics, not mysticism. That's my soapbox for XG.
Yeah, it's well stated. I think people don't understand what regression to the mean means either. Regression to the mean in the case of Aston Villa would be where Aston Villa continues to get beat on XG and is now losing games, not winning games.
Thank you.
That would be an appropriate, yup, the XG god is coming back to get you. You're not scoring the screamers anymore. That would be appropriate. That would be fair. Now, if you also want to look at the performances now and say, see, we said earlier when you were overperforming your XG that you weren't actually that good, and now you're losing. Put the XG now aside. That also is an appropriate response to what is happening to Aston Villa and before. Like they always said, you can't outperform your XG by that much for that long. You guys aren't actually as good as what your points are. That's all fair. But like you said, to now laugh and point at Aston Villa 1.8, Wolves 1.3 or whatever it was. I think it was lower than that, but
it was you're close. Yeah.
To point at something like that and be like, ha ha ha, this is XG coming to get its goods. You don't understand numbers. It's such a simple concept and such a simple philosophy, particularly when you put context on it. And it's funny that the people that don't understand it are the ones who say, this is a simple concept. You should understand it.
They're the most ardent defenders of it.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm always the performance guy. I want the results to match the performances, and you're probably seeing that come to roost now, I guess. But let's put this one aside. As you said, this is definitely the lowest that Villa have been all year, and we have the opportunity to turn it around on Wednesday, and then subsequently against Manchester United. But we're here to talk about Chelsea. So last time we met, Villa did win 2-1, but different manager, kind of irrelevant. Not really a need to reanalyze that match. So what is Chelsea now? They've won something like 8 of 12 under Liam Rossinier since he came about. This might have been a pre-Arsenal stat, so maybe it's 8 of 13. But if you look at those results, they haven't necessarily beat anyone that you would say is quote unquote good. They've got smashed by Arsenal 3 different times in that sequence. They've got bad draws against Burnley, against Leeds, maybe looking like a better draw the way Leeds are playing now. But they've got some meh results in there. What has he ultimately done to change them from Enzo Maresca? He's certainly liberated the front six a little bit. They're playing with a lot more freedom. Enzo Fernandez, in particular, has repeatedly been on record saying that there's a lot more creativity, ability for players to improvise in the final third. And so he's using a really aggressive front six, making much more use of Andre Santos in the midfield, much more focal point for them. Their possession numbers have gone up, so less counterattacking than they were under Maresca. Some people talk about some quicker links through midfield, but ultimately he's been pretty tactically flexible and hasn't necessarily settled on a first 11, on a set formation, on a set tactics. He's certainly, I think, still testing, chopping, changing, and adapting to his opposition, which makes him pretty difficult to game plan for. Probably a little conservative, though, is the one criticism that has been labeled at him. Or not conservative, naive is probably the word that I'm looking for, given how they played in the Carabao Cup against Arsenal and in some of these other matches. It just doesn't seem like he necessarily knows how to adapt his team to more tactically astute managers and higher quality opposition.
Yeah, the other big criticism that I think can be leveled, and it's not necessarily at him directly, at Rossinier directly, who I always want to call Rosenois, because I feel like it should be that. I think the discipline, because boy, howdy, have they had a lot of, I think they've had 2 consecutive sending offs, if I remember right. So
which started under Maresca. And
it did. So I'm not placing it all at his feet, but you do have to get that under control, because at this point they have an injury list and they also have a suspension list, of multiple players. Granted, they have 78 players on the roster, so it really doesn't matter, which I was going to make that joke when you said he can't settle on a first 11. Why do you have to? You have 4, just throw somebody out there, see what happens. But so I think, and that's been, I think, the big talking point now over the last handful of days for Chelsea has been the discipline issues. And it's a fair point to raise because they're racking up yellows and reds in pretty rapid succession here.
Thank God Pedro Neto, because he's been, I feel like, on fire. And so not needing to face him is definitely a big boon for Aston
He's
Villa.
another one who I feel like he scores a million goals against Aston Villa. It's probably like 4, maybe less.
So he's
like
he's out suspended. Kukure, I think, will still be out injured. The number, as you said, they've got a lengthy injury list, but it almost doesn't matter because they have so many guys. All those guys could have been benched anyway, and we probably wouldn't have noticed. But Chris, you know, kind of like Wolves being a difficult one to analyze just because it was all so bad. This is a difficult one to preview because it almost feels so not dependent at all on Chelsea.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair point. I think that this is about Villa and particularly Unai Emery's ability to adjust and find a way to bring, I mean, I hate to say bring vibes back, but bring some positivity and give the fans and the players some hope here, because if things continue to go south, I think it's going to get ugly quickly, because it wasn't that long ago that Villa were like 8 points clear of 5th place, and now Liverpool are 3 points back. So playing well again. So there's cause for concern, for sure. And Villa have to find a way out of it. And I'm not, we've talked about the things that need to be done, both tactically and personnel wise. The question is, are they going to get done? And I mean, Emery is in a better position than you or I are to understand what changes need to be made and how. But I don't know if you do training sessions where you force guys to stay wide, and if they come in, you blow the whistle and stop and start again. I don't know, but there's got to be something done, particularly about the tactics, where you have to show them how close they are together and how easy they are to defend, because that's the single biggest issue. If you address that, then the standing on the ball, slow movement is not as big of an issue, because if you can move the ball across the pitch and make the defense move, creating space, then we've seen the success of that, right? So the change has to come, and this is an opportunity. This game and the following against Manchester United are 2 opportunities of teams that are around you where you can change the tenor of the feeling around the club right now from extremely negative to much more positive. Because if you get a couple of points out of a win or 4 points out of these, and then you get some guys back off injury, all of a sudden we're going into April saying, hey, we're in a decent spot here now. But at this point, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, 4 points is probably the minimum to keep Villa's season on track at this point and not have a severe risk of falling out of the Champions League places. Chelsea thankfully have a fairly difficult run-in for the remainder of the season. So do Aston Villa. But if you can maintain a 6-point gap at minimum coming out of this one, it does seem like it could be tough for Chelsea to make that up, particularly how they've performed against better teams so far this year. If Villa lose and all of a sudden that becomes 3 points back, I texted this to you a few days ago, and we text so much, I don't think I can find it this quickly, but all of a sudden now I'm looking at Brentford's next 5 are fairly easy against bottom half of the table. And, Villa could quickly, with back-to-back losses, be facing a fight to stay in the Europa League or potentially drop down to Conference League. At this point, like it is pretty tight, and the points are there for Brentford to gain. So,
and they're playing well,
So that's why this, again, as I said at the outset, becomes a game that really Villa cannot afford to lose. Potentially the most pivotal of the season. Need to get at least a draw at home here. The one thing that may work in Villa's favor is every team that we have struggled against over the last 5 has set up in a mid to low block. Who did Villa look best against? Newcastle United, who are willing to come out a little bit and play. We talked about how Liam Rossinier has a very aggressive front six. Does that make them a little bit vulnerable to the counterattack, to creating a little bit, to leaving a little bit more space in behind for Villa to exploit? Maybe. So, some of the issues that we've seen may not be as much of a problem in this one.
Right.
But, unfortunately, the counter to that is that confidence at Villa has to be
all-time
completely
low.
on the floor.
Yeah.
So, are the players even capable at this point of taking advantage of or exploiting that? I genuinely don't know. And again, that comes back to an Unai Emery question of can he get them motivated? Can he find the ways to put them in positions to make them successful?
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that I mentioned it earlier, discipline could come into play, but I think to create discipline issues for Chelsea, there are two things that have to happen. Morgan Rogers has to see a lot of the ball because he does such a great job in terms of creating situations where he can get fouled, but the ball has to move more quickly. I mentioned it in the Wolves preview that Wolverhampton Wanderers were one of the teams that committed the most fouls in the league, and we didn't see that play out because
didn't we almost double them up in foul?
Because for that to happen, you need to actually move the ball, and put their defenders and whoever put their players in position to commit fouls, and that is not what we have seen in recent weeks. So if you're going to take advantage of a team that can play a little loose defensively, you've got to put yourself in a position to do so. They're not just going to come out and hack you down unless they're, Sean Dyche's Burnley or something like that.
Chris, do you even want to play against 10 men right now?
That's a good point.
I don't.
Yeah. That's sad.
10 men away from home, I guarantee you they would put all of them behind the ball and just try and use one of their strikers, João Pedro or whoever, just on the counter, and that to me spells 1-0 to Chelsea.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a sad point to make, but a fair one.
So, Chris, what are you expecting from Aston Villa?
I don't know. I really don't, but I think, and I'm doing off top of my head here. I know I normally write it out, but it's going to be Emi Martinez. I think Matty Cash, Konsa, Pau Torres again makes the most sense. I would go Ian Maatsen because I think you have to change it up. Luka Dean was so poor in the last game. Onana. See, now I'm hesitating. I don't know. Is this because I don't know if you go Barkley?
I don't think
here.
He's changing anything. I could tell you what I would do.
Yeah,
but I genuinely think that the lineup is just going to be everybody that you named: Onana, Luiz, Sancho, Rogers, Buendia, Ali.
Watkins. Yeah, so that's I would probably stay with Luiz and then put Barkley at the 10, and assume a relatively early hook for him because of his fitness, and then Rogers and I guess Sancho going from left to the right there, and up top it's Tammy for me. It's Tammy until otherwise. For me,
I would start Tammy to be fair. I would go with your lineup. I really hope we see an earlier dose of Alisson. Came in off the bench against Wolves, came in off the bench. Prior to that, looked bright. I know he's had injury issues since coming over to England, so probably too soon for a start, too dynamic. But could he come in at the 60th minute mark for 30 minutes of chaos to actually create something? I would love to see that.
The Daniel Malen, right?
There's hopefully something to him, but I would love to see your lineup. I would love to see Barkley in at the 10, Rogers out wide, and Tammy up top. I just don't think Unai is going to do it.
I think you have to make changes now. If you don't, what message are you sending? But so I will point out, this is like the first podcast where we've really started to question the tactics and personnel decisions of Sir Unai Emery. But I think it's warranted because I think we're in a rut here where, I mean, like I said, no one, even XG philosophy, would have watched that game against Wolves and said, "Oh yeah, Villa, better side, better team."
Mhm.
Nobody,
I agree.
you know.
I agree. What have you got on a score prediction?
Oh, I have 2-0 Chelsea.
I have the same score.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope we're both wrong.
I hope we're both wrong too. Usually when we agree in this way, we are both wrong.
Yep, that's the good
But
news. The problem is we don't play. It actually has nothing to do with the bearing on the game. You know,
I
our
know.
our our score predictions don't actually mean anything.
Until I see a performance, I think it's going to be hard for me to predict another Villa draw, let alone a win.
Yeah. Well, maybe we both got this one wrong, pal. Maybe.
Yep. Well, I know I'll be watching because I have nothing better to do with my Wednesday afternoon. I hope that you will have an opportunity to watch a victory as well. Chris, anything else on this one?
No, I think we managed to do this in a relatively short space of time, given that we were doing 2 games. That's the only
Yeah,
thing I'm happy about.
I'm proud of us. All right, man. Well, until probably Wednesday evening, as always, up the Villa.
Up the Villa.
Hi, Mom and Dad.